Well, it's now afternoon, so good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to extend my thanks to SAFETY4SEA and for all the delegates that are here today. I am going to touch on one of the topics in relation to human factors, and this is the normalization of deviation. It is very subtle, it is very dangerous, and it's on the likelihood of people are looking for a practical workaround, but this has very dangerous consequences and subsequently becomes normal over time. So, what is it? Well, it's a series of small deviations from established safe working practices on board. Subsequently, if nothing goes wrong, everyone is quite happy to continue and it becomes normal. I'm now going to move on to a case study that basically occurred on one of our memberships, and hence the title of the presentation. So, the crew on board this vessel decided that, well, as a practical workaround and to gain easy access to the hatch covers, the bulwark of the ship, located aft, was an ideal platform to create a walkway on. They initially realized that, well, it's a bit unsafe on the outboard side because you can fall down and obviously injure yourself. So they constructed safety railings. That was fine. Practices carried on. It was subsequently used as a walkway. Time saving, ease of convenience. The problem is, as human nature stands, everything is we like an easy workaround to do a job. Everyone likes that. If you can find a shortcut to do something and make your life easier, you will obviously do it. So, subsequently what happened? Well, the second mate was using the walkway, fell off the walkway, made contact with the bunker station, and subsequently sustained severe head injuries, and this resulted in life-changing injuries being sustained. He is still recovering a year and a half later in hospital. The interesting point with this case is that we then went to the entire fleet of sister ships and had a look at it. Every single sister ship, and there were 10 of them, had implemented that format of a walkway on board the ship. It was so systemic that no one had noticed this issue at all, from the superintendents on board this fleet across the board. At not one stage had anyone turned around and said, this is actually not safe. This is actually not a walkway. You shouldn't be doing this at all. It took a long time even to basically convince the owners and the operators at the end of the day that this was not correct. First of all, a walkway will never have a slope in it at all. So, the lessons to be learned. Basically, shortcuts can snowball very, very quickly into a dangerous situation. The issue is on board, if you deviate once from a safety practice on board, all it takes is that deviation to go unnoticed 4 to 5 times. And then it becomes the norm. That's all it takes. So your assessment of an unsafe situation completely changes. Okay? Just because nothing happens doesn't mean that the practice being undertaken is unsafe. Okay? And as I mentioned before, it's the leadership oversight that is very, very important. On the first slide, you saw pictures of life rafts. They were basically covered with tarpaulin and strapped down, so they were completely useless in their deployment. I actually attended on board that vessel. I was standing next to the captain, the chief engineer, the superintendent of the ship, the HSEQ supervisor for that vessel, and no one basically said anything because it had become so ingrained that even they were not basically paying attention to that deviation. Right, so obviously the point is it's to basically foster basically a safety culture on board, and when there are any deviations, then those need to be flagged up. Regular safety audits. Now, people can have audits, checks, superintendents go on board ships to see what's going on, to see how the vessels are going on, and still there is basically oversight of unsafe practices on board. So the option is because people generally are assigned, say, one vessel, they're in rotation, senior officers, with a certain amount of ships, they become very used to what is there day to day on board that ship. So they don't notice it. What we try to encourage is that there are checklists, there are procedures, they're all on board a ship, so technically this shouldn't happen. But the problem being, it's always done by the people who actually are doing that job in that department. So one of the easiest ways to make sure that checks and procedures are being followed on board a ship is actually give it to another department. So when the deck department are doing something on board, you basically go to the engineering department senior staff and you say, here's the checklist for moving the hatch covers or opening the hatch covers. Watch what we're doing. And you'll actually be surprised. That's when the deviations from those procedures and practices are actually picked up. It's the same with your superintendents. It's very easy because they know the vessel, they know what the limitations are, so you need to switch your superintendents around on a fleet because that is a fresh pair of eyes on board that ship. And the most important thing, I get it across my desk day in and day out, when it comes to an incident and there's a causation behind it, and I get the whole point of human error written across it. That is not good enough, okay? We need to, if we're going to prevent these practices from happening on board, we need to look at the psychology behind why that practice occurred on board that vessel. And if you understand that, you can basically put the measures in place to help stop it. And that's me done. Short and sweet, everyone. Thank you very much.